So I'm going to introduce our speaker tonight. It's Eric David Laxman. Um, Eric is a friend of the carving studio. He was enrolled in the first class, the pilot program, in 1986. He served as a volunteer and a teacher later on. Had a lot of volunteer time involved with the development of the West Rutland site when we moved over there in 1990. He studied school at the Museum of Fine Arts, studied fine arts there, and that's where he met Bee. He has a BFA from Tufts University in chemistry.
Yes,
Hmm?
yes.
A BS, sorry. BFA. He's a New York-based sculptor and curator who has participated in exhibitions around the country. He's also the recipient of many fine art awards and public art commissions for permanent installations of his sculpture throughout the United States. I think I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to show us.
Thanks. It was so great to be here, and so great to have Bea Amori here. Um, I got started. I was a student at Tufts and enrolled in stone carving at night and commuted to museum school. And actually, Bea was the instructor there, and Carol was the assistant. And Carol showed me how to hold my hammer and chisel for the first time. So coming up to the carving studio that first summer, it changed my life and the whole course of my life. And I've been working in the arts ever since. It's been an amazing journey. So it's really great to be here to speak at the carving studio, and I'm looking forward to share the slides that I put together. Or should we share the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is a picture of me the very first summer in 1986. And in their postcard, you can see me on the bottom left with the bandana and the white shirt. I can't work if I'm not wearing a bandana. That's rule number one. And anyway, it's hard to believe it's been 35 years. And this is where it all began. I always loved making art from the time I was a very, very young child. At the very early age, I used to arrange blocks on the floor into patterns. And then at around the age of 8, I started taking ceramics classes at, I grew up in the same county here at the Rockland Center for the Arts. And this is a small ceramic piece, it's a snake charmer. I just like to show this because it won a blue ribbon in the 4-H. These are a couple of photos of my shop at home. And on the left, I made this big smiley face. I have a huge collection of found objects, some of which I put into some of the sculptures, which you'll see coming up. And on the right, just this past summer or fall, I put all these wheels up, and it's dedicated to Bee and her journey on the wheel. One of the first things I want to say about my work and one of my philosophies about art in general is that to me, the whole essence of art is the idea of transformation. Taking any type of raw material, whatever it is, it can be any material, and transmuting it into something else while still retaining some of the properties that it has to begin with. And in this piece, this was made for an exhibition. Transformation was the theme. And it has steel, stainless steel, wood, stone, regular steel rebar. Another thing I'm going to tie together is a lot of my personal works are autobiographical in some way. And even if I don't know at the time when I'm working on it things that I'm processing or that have been in my sort of psyche come out. And a lot of times when I look back, I'll see how it relates to things that I was working on in my personal life. This was the very first stone piece I carved at the museum school in 1986. I think it's Danby marble. It's about 11 inches or 12 inches square by 8 inches deep. I call it Strength Within. And as a first piece, it's kind of like a seed, you know, it's like this figure that's kind of emerging. And this is another early piece. It's called Outer Limits. And it sort of is like the reverse of the Michelangelo slaves. It's like the figure is with the block, is within the block. And that square is like the limits of our perception or awareness. This is an early commission. And you know, at the early stages of my carving, I was working from block and working just to reduce. And I was fortunate to get this commission and be able to work in a very lifelike, realistic way. Very early on, I started to use fragments and put them together to construct and to use steel as a foundation or a base for the sculptures. This is called transformation figure. And with the base, it stands around 66 inches, like 60, something like that. Here again, I was combining stone pieces to make one on the left is the front view and then the right is the back view, and just mounting the piece on stone. This is called seated ascension. And it's just, I was really interested in the gesture and was interested in bringing out the qualities of the stone and not just making a perfectly smooth stone finish. And here, after I started working, I was interested in combining steel with the marble or found stone. On the right, I'm using a diabase, which is like like a basalt, that's a local stone. And I really like the idea of fitting together and piecing together these different elements to create a whole. And on the left, you can see where I'm combining fabricated steel pieces with these found wheels. The left is called striding figure, and the right is called boundaries, defining boundaries. And to me, that's been a key process in my therapy, is learning how to have healthy boundaries with people and family and the world who I interact with. This is called plow warrior figure. And here again, I'm combining, the torso has a combination of found steel and forged and fabricated steel. And it's mounted on a plow that I that I found at Rose's, you know the place in Whitehall. I've gotten a lot of stuff from her, and again, it's like this figure that's grounded and moving through the earth, and to me, this life is like you have to be a warrior of sorts to get through all the challenges that we face as to be an artist. Here again, I'm interested in combining materials, and it's also autobiographical. The piece on the left was created to commemorate a friend, like a father figure to me who unfortunately died of suicide. It's called A Prayer for the Suffering. And it combines steel and marble pieces, and the base is like two hands that are supporting the figure. And on the right is a combination of found wood elements that have been cut and carved. And then on the inside, you have steel and these found stones, again, this diabase stone that have been fitted together. And I call this missing parts. And to me, it's like when we have parts of ourselves that need to be filled in and to complete ourselves. And again, I'm interested in the gesture and the movement of the forms. This is also kind of autobiographical. It's a Saint Sebastian. It's made with carved plywood, and the size. It's about 44 inches tall. And again, there's found steel elements. The back is an old steel cabinet. The right is found steel elements and hinges. And the arrows, the feathers on the arrows are like this corrugated mesh that I cut and welded carefully. But the figure is very flat. It's only about an inch thick. And so you get this illusion of depth. And then with the layering, it's like almost like a topographical map. And again, this is another self-portrait. Here I've combined found objects with translucent print transparency film. And I call this protected and invisible. And it's this notion of having felt invisible in certain ways growing up, and just need to protect myself and maybe hide in certain ways. And one of the things I wanted to show is the relationship between my personal work and commission pieces. So here are these figurative pieces that I've done on my personal work. And here is an abstracted figure. It's called Josephine. It's inspired by Josephine Baker. And here I'm combining stainless steel and bronze and mild steel on a steel and marble base. That stands about 9 feet tall when it's in its completed form. That's in the lobby of a luxury apartment building in Yonkers, New York. And this was a commission for an Art Deco, landmark Art Deco building. It's called Lady Patience. It's a hollow, basically a hollow figure. All of these forms, it's not cast, it's all fabricated from sheet. And it stands about 60 inches, the figure itself, and then another foot or so on the base, so about 6 feet tall. And this is altogether a non sequitur, but I love roosters, and I sort of like to strut my stuff around. And this is a combination of carved found wood and found objects and forged steel objects, all fabricated and put together. It's about 24 inches tall, 20 inches tall. And I was commissioned in a nearby area in Yonkers to do an entrance sculpture. This was a maquette. It's only about 15 inches tall in stainless steel. The crane represents good fortune and bountifulness, and the owner wanted to have this at the front. And here's the finished piece in front of the apartment building. These are rental apartments, again in Yonkers. That stands about, the bird itself is about 6 feet, and then with the base, sort of like a dock with these, I used telephone poles and bound them together. Another really important theme for those who know me is the heart. It's something that I have a tradition of creating some type of art for Valentine's Day and photographing it and sending a mass email. At the very beginning, I was making handmade cards and sending them to friends and family. This is called Layered Heart. It's 8 by 8. This is a bronze version of the original steel that was made using torch cut steel elements that are welded and layered together. This is Resilient Heart. It's I found many of these railroad ties. Spikes up in Vermont near the carving studio by the railroad tracks. And that center part is Cranston red marble. This is called Rugged Heart. It's about 30 inches wide and 30 inches tall. Again, these are pieces. There was a landslide off the mountain up the road from me, and I saw all these pieces on the side of the road in the early winter, and thought that those look like a cool thing to put together into the shape of a heart. And there you have it. And then this is a three different pieces. On the left is plywood again. This is a little bit thicker, 2 inches, with stainless steel making those veins. I call that anatomy of a heart. And in the middle is that found diabase again. It was split, and I liked the idea of this sort of broken heart. And then I carved that very delicate wing out of Vermont marble, and the piece is called Broken Heart, Broken Wing. And then on the right is all found objects. It's a repurposed barbecue lid and these found plumbing elements that I think I probably found those up in buildings behind West Rutland site. I've scavenged there a lot for materials. Okay, another recurring theme in my work is a flame, a fire. And to me, it's always been a very powerful image, idea of transmutation of energy, of, I don't know, hope and eternity. So this is called dancing flame. The flames are stainless steel and the base is a welded fabricated steel. And here, this is called embracing flames. The silver is stainless steel and the black is Champlain black marble and the base is bronze. And that stands about 5.5 feet. And this is one of the most recent pieces I've done. It's called Excelsior, Ever Upward. It's 3 flame-like forms. That's cast aluminum. Actually, Glenn cast those for me from original paper. This was a model for a potential commission, which I didn't get, but the flames are approximately 20 inches tall. And that base is welded steel. And here's a relationship to, again, I've done those personal pieces, and here is one of the first commissions I did. This is all fabricated bronze, and I'll be talking about this process, later on. I just sort of developed this technique to create these forms in a 3-sided method. This is all made from sheet metal. I started working this way because it was extremely expensive to do these forms and cast them. And my clients at the time were not willing to spend the money for that process. So I developed this way of fabricating these forms myself in the studio. This is called Anahata Fountain. And Anahata is the name for the 4th chakra, the heart chakra. And I was commissioned to do this a new version of that at a building in Long Island, Kreider House. And that's the White Stone Bridge in the background. This piece stands with the base about 14 feet tall. It's all stainless steel. And again, I got interested in these abstractions and just the idea of movement and flow and energy, and just trying to create this dynamic feeling of movement. Here's some other views of that piece. And here's, I had actually created this myself as a personal piece. It's called Standing Wave. The wave is about 10 feet tall. And then the developer that has commissioned some other works, that's the first piece we did together. He commissioned a different base for it, which you see in the picture. And this is in Ossining by the ferry there, right on the Hudson River. And again, I was really interested in this sort of upward flow of movement. Standing wave in music is when you're in harmonics and you get the resonance, like when a guitar string, you hit a note, it becomes a standing wave. And here is a memorial I did. It's a Munich 11 memorial. In 1970, there was an unfortunate event at the Munich Olympics. 11 athletes and coaches were murdered by terrorists. And the Jewish community campus asked me to commission me to do this piece to commemorate them. It was right before the Olympics in 2012, and they were trying to get the Olympic Committee to honor a minute of silence for the athletes in the opening ceremonies. And actually, finally, just this past Olympics, they achieved that. It took 50 years for that to happen. But here, the flame represents the Olympic torch, and it also stands for the eternal flame in the Jewish faith, this idea that our spirit continues. And the base is corten steel, and it's a segmented construction and design, and each of the athletes' names is inscribed on the individual plates that go around. And this community center is in the community here that I live in. It stands with the base about 8 feet tall. And then this is one of the most recent flame-like sculptures I created. It's called Spiral Synergy. It's 2 separate parts that mount together, and it's like it's almost like a DNA helix. And again, I'm really interested in this fluid movement and upward motion, and just to create an inspiring form. There are some other views of that piece. The base is bronze, and the top is all stainless steel. And I'm going to be showing some photos of that in production in a little bit. This is one of the first commissions I did in stainless. It's called Serpiente Grande. This was a 4-sided form. It's about 50 feet wide, and I don't know, about 3 feet tall in the center there. And this is also a fairly recent commission. It's called Whirl of Wonder. It's commissioned for a library. And here I've combined Verde antique marble. And the idea was to represent the idea of the library being a world and an inspiration for creativity and learning and seeking knowledge. And it was created to dedicate a board member who's been on the board for 50 years and helped create the beautiful architecture in there. That's the inner courtyard. And here's another large commission. This was the largest commission I've done so far. I did this in 2009. It was a national competition, and it combines, it's in the center called Journal Square. It's called A Conversation in 6 Parts. And the idea was to create a piece. To me, if people are talking about the sculpture and interested in walking around it and engaging with it, it's the idea of creating a conversation is very important. And this is called concentric conversation. This is 2 elements stacked on each other. Again, it's a similar construction that I'll be showing you before. This is also in front of a residential apartment building in Yonkers. And there were 2 of them here on either side. They're mirror images of each other. And I was commissioned to do a larger version of them for a building in New York City right before the pandemic in 2019. This is 8 feet tall. The pieces previously were about 6 feet in total. And this is in the lobby of the Helena building in Manhattan on 57th Street. And this was commissioned for a medical health center. It's called Ribbon of Hope. And it sort of speaks for itself. But this is, again, this is a combination of stainless steel and bronze. And it stands around 9 feet tall. So my design process, how are we doing for time, Carol? I can't hear you.
7:25. We're good.
Left? Okay.
No,
good.
half an hour left, or 15 minutes left.
Okay. Oh, 7:25. Okay. So this is so the design process for the commissions happened a number of different ways. In this case, I was asked to create some kind of a rendering first as a preliminary stage and to enter the competition. So on the left, I had photographed elements of another sculpture in progress, And then I used Photoshop to create this arrangement in this central square. And I became a finalist, and then I was given a stipend to create the scale model, which is on the right. And I work frequently in cardboard and hot glue. And I always feel when I'm working that with these simple materials, it's like I can go all the way back to my early childhood and working just very simply with just the real basics. And again, here in this case, I really was interested to create an environment for the work. So as part of the model, I included landscaping elements. And again, I also created a scale version of the truck that we shipped it in, so I could make sure it would fit in the inside of the truck. So we delivered this ourselves. I had 2 helpers or 3 helpers, and we drove all the way to Ohio. This is just north of Cincinnati, Hamilton, Ohio. And here, again, I'm working with cardboard. In this case, I did an intermediate model, and that allowed me to create these patterns. And the way I build these sculptures is in sort of a T structure. I create the silhouette, which is the rib you see like sticking up, and then the piece that runs. You can kind of see the T. If you could see me, it's a T. Can you see me? And once I have that, also this is another example of a preliminary drawing and then a 3D model. This was the model for the Anahata sculpture at the Kreider House. And that's, in this case, I used wood for the model. And again, here's a wire model that I created for the spiral synergy. And then I never made a cardboard model of that. I figured that out full scale with cardboard patterns. And on the right is a rendering I did to show the client what it would look like. And here I used Photoshop to put the rendering into the landscape. And there on the right, you can see the finished piece. So it's pretty similar. I think the finished piece is better than the drawing, which is, it's always better to have the finished piece be better than the proposal. So here's me fabricating that synergy piece. So you can see here I've created that T. The top that's sort of running around is the top of the T, and the piece coming down is the bottom. And once I have that structure together, I use cardboard to create patterns to fill in and create the two other sides. And so there you can see me tracing. I very carefully cut the cardboard and create these long patterns, and you can see on both sides there. And the bottom, the one form I think is already finished in this case. No. Anyway, okay. And that's the inside of my studio, by the way. And there you can see I cut the cardboard patterns and try to maximize the use of the stainless steel sheet. And I use a nibbling tool to cut those patterns out and sand the edges and prepare them to be manipulated. And then I'm bending and very carefully arranging them and to get them to fit on the structure that I've created. And there you can see all the clamps. And once I have the forms clamped, I spot weld to get everything secured. And then I very carefully weld. You have to be very careful with the stainless steel because it tends to warp. And so I have to weld in very short segments and move around. And then when it's all finished, I've welded all those seams. you can see there those, the short segments that are, and then eventually I fill them all in to create one continuous weld along all the seams. And on the right is a big hand that I had created. See me welding there. And then once it's all welded, the real fun begins. There's a lot of grinding. I have to be very careful because this sheet is only 3/32 of an inch. It's less than 1/8 of an inch. So I have to be very careful because once the weld is ground and you just get left with metal, you really don't know what's left until you go through. So I have to be very careful when I'm welding it to try to fill in everything and make sure there are no pits. And often I'll have to go back in certain places to touch in. And so once it's all ground smooth, then I use different grits of sanding I use a 4.5-inch angle grinder to do most of this work. And then after the sanding with the sandpaper, I use Scotch-Brite pads by hand, and then the pieces finally are waxed to give it just some protection against the weather and to keep dirt. That doesn't last for a very long time, but it helps to preserve it, at least initially. And this is a collage of the process of that World of Wonder piece, just to sort of give you a overview of the whole process. You can see the different stages. On the top, you see the silhouette shapes where I was checking that. In that particular case, the piece has a kinetic element. The internal form rotates. It doesn't rotate completely at 360, but it rotates back and forth. And I had to, at certain points, I had to add counterbalance so that it would hang properly and rotate. And then you can see you see me cutting those forms, and then all the clamping. And then, in this particular piece, the inside T element was bronze, and the two sides, the outer sides, was stainless steel. And there in the bottom, you see me applying wax to the larger form. And this is a piece that I'm currently working on. It's for a new hotel that's under construction in Bristol, Connecticut. And on the left, you can see this is actually a photoshopped rendering of the 3D model I created. And then on the right was the two parts in just the T structure before the sides have been added. And I'm still in the process of working on that sculpture right now. And I think that's my last slide. So I guess I can stop sharing.
Eric, that was one of my questions, was the have you been using the movement in those pieces? They are already
No, most of them are static.
uh-huh.
That World of Wonder piece is the first time that I've used an element that moves. And I think it'd be fun to see that more. Have them actually move. I mean, in most of the work that I've done, the movement is in the form, and it's
right.
the feeling of movement, but it's a static sculpture. Mm-hmm. So to actually have a piece that could rotate. I don't know how much it rotates. It's in a courtyard. I don't know how much wind comes in there, and I don't think they're letting anybody into the courtyard to see it up close. I'm not sure. Maybe that important events they let people come in there. It's been the pandemic, so it's been crazy with when people have been in the library. So I give the owners long-term maintenance instructions.
Yeah, do you see that? Yeah.
No, not really. I say in my contract that maintenance is not included, and they can hire me on a early days to do spot treatment. I actually just recently did a spot treatment on that Munich 11.
You did what?
On the Munich 11 memorial, I gave it a spot treatment. They hired me to come in and sort of buff up the stainless steel and also to do some cleaning on the steel parts so you can see the names. It does all the pieces do age, outside. Even if the stainless steel is not, the stainless steel doesn't rust, but with pollution and the weather, it does develop some surface things. It's impossible to keep it completely.
Is
Eric,
wax?
oh, sorry. Go ahead, B.
No, go ahead.
No, in the earlier pieces that you showed, where you had stone plus metal on it, how did you apply the metal? Do you like pound it into shape, or what do you do?
Well, in a lot of cases, with those pieces, they're inset into the stone, so it's a very painstaking process of, I get the steel piece pretty close to being finished, and then it's a process of carving the stone and doing some work on reducing the metal to get them to be married and to fit. And then what a lot of times I'll do is I weld a post to the steel, and and then have a corresponding hole in the stone so that it's actually epoxied in. Or in some pieces, they are the steel connects in a way that gives it integrity. It sort of wraps around. So it's a combination. And a lot of times what I can do also is drill a hole in the steel to create a hole that corresponds, and epoxy the steel piece in, and then weld the surface and then finish the surface. And I find the thing that I said didn't say during when I was showing the slides, when I do a commission work, you show a model and a drawing, and there really are constraints that you really need to produce the piece pretty close to what you've presented to the client. And in the sculpture, my own personal sculpture, it's a much more fluid journey. I may have an idea at the beginning about what it's going to be, but very often it changes. Or I have a rough idea of a feeling or a concept that I want to bring out. A lot of times I'll have a title for the piece first, and then I'm trying to bring out that idea in the work. Yeah. And the piece is done when I feel it resonates with me, that whatever feeling that I'm trying to obtain, it's not an intellectual thing. It's a little more of a real intuitive thing. Yeah. And also the idea, one of the things I really love about combining the stone and the metal together is it gives me a way to construct. I'm reducing and I'm adding, and it's great to be able to utilize both processes simultaneously, and I can decide to add something and use my fabrication abilities to figure out a way to support it. And the steel adds a structure and strength that the stone alone it can have, but it doesn't always.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's great.
Do you see that one from Judith?
Yeah, my whole life has been an ongoing balancing act, and trying to steal time from paid work. One of the things I didn't mention at the beginning is that I do a lot of commissioned functional artworks, furniture. Because of the time constraints, I didn't even show any of those works. I have a large body of work of paid commissions that are smaller all different sizes, but railings, tables, all different types of things. I've worked for restaurants, creating decorative elements, and yeah, it's always been a challenge finding time to do both, and being grateful. And I mean, I think when I was starting out, I was feeling miserable most of the time because either if I was working on my art, I wasn't making money, and if I was making money, I wasn't making my art. And finally, I made peace with the reality that I had to do both, and to find a way to find joy and enjoy the process of whatever I was making, and not be worried about, is it my personal art? Because anything you make, anything that I make, once I've signed, shaken hands with the client, it becomes my own, and I make it my own. And it makes it very difficult to really make a lot of money, because I always, most of the time, end up putting way more time into the piece than what I'm really getting. So it's always been a balancing act. That's been a difficult one, but I may not have a lot of money, but I have a lot of work out there. So I guess when I die, no one's going to be asking how much money I had when I die, but they work. And aside from that, I love, there's a lot of things I didn't show because it was limited time, but I love to make costumes, and that's where the hot glue and cardboard really comes out. And it's usually like a week, maybe 2 weeks before Halloween that I start. And again, it's like I have an concept, and I'll research images, and then I'll throw together, and they've been pretty elaborate, and I've made floats, and if we had a longer time, I could have showed you some of those fun images too. But I felt like I needed to just edit it down to just certain things, and even then, it was just a selection, not everything.
Well, I have to say, it's been an incredible journey to review some of your history with you. And I'm still in awe, even of your first sculpture. That first finished sculpture was one of the most incredible first pieces that I've ever seen in my whole life. And I remember at museum school, your early experiments with steel. And I think it's pretty extraordinary that you've become a master in both the stone and the steel, and developed a very personal language, of expression. And the range of the work is really extraordinary. I mean, most people, the ones that you just described are also sculptures. I mean, the Halloween pieces, you know what I mean? These fantastic installations that you've done. And the incredible attention to handwork. Like, one of my favorite pieces is that steel heart. It's all the raw cuts, put together. Is an absolutely extraordinary piece. And even the the ways that you've devised of working with these open work, sort of more public art pieces is extremely inventive. And I love the fact that they are as airy as they are. They're very approachable. A lot of sculpture that ends up in the public sphere sometimes puts you off rather than invites you in. And your pieces are so open that, you're looking through them at your friend on the other side, or the landscape. They're pretty fascinating, and they really change. Any place that you're at is giving you a completely different view. And they're really fascinating. I mean, I'm in awe of your career up to now. You're only what, 57?
7, yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, this is, you're still a baby, but from the viewpoint of 79, it's a completely different viewpoint. But that struggle that you're talking about between one's personal work and public work, or personal work and work for money. I mean, even David Smith took on welding jobs, which is the way he supported himself. I mean, didn't have a huge amount of money most of his life. And it's, I mean, all of us who are sculptors looking at each other on the screen can really identify with this issue. You know, it's a very complicated life, and you've been incredibly successful. But even very successful artists have this balancing act, which
Yeah.
is complicated, and the finances isn't getting easier. You know?
Yeah, it's really it's rare that there's a lot of money left over. You know.
Oh, it's lucky if there's any.
Most of the time, it's I'm running around to get to get the next job. You know, after it's like I'm just breaking even most of the time. So it's a challenge.
No, it's complicated. I mean, for me, teaching was the base. I had 3 kids to support, and I was a single parent, and so I needed something, you know what I mean? But then I was always doing the rest. You know, it's a juggling act. It's a real juggling act. Anyway, thank you. It was an extraordinary.
Thank you for all your words, B. You're very eloquent. I appreciate the way you speak about my work.
You get some great chat. Are you reading what's in the chat? Carol, maybe you want to read them.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's this, your forms are so elegant and hold so much movement. Wouldn't guess the complexity that went into building the structure. Can you talk about your use of bronze, and can you say why you use it?
Well, I mean, it's a much warmer metal in its finish, and I happen to like to. I have some cast sculptures that were also commissioned, and I didn't even show them because anyway, I was trying to edit things down and not. I've enjoyed doing some bronze casting, where I'll make a full-size model maybe in clay, and then cast it in plaster, and then have it cast. In that case, the whole casting process is done at the foundry, and then I may do some finishing at the end. A lot of cases, it's even more efficient to have the foundry do it, because they're much more well equipped to clean that whole piece than I am in my studio. The bronze is it's a softer metal, and but it welds very similarly to either the steel or stainless steel. In all 3 cases with those metals, it's a direct current, and I use a lot of times. Most of the time, I'm using a TIG welder, so I have a feed wire and a torch. That's so you're feeding the same metal into the weld to fill it. It's just, I happen to like to mix the different materials so you get a contrast in different colors in the finished piece. I haven't really mastered a lot of different patinas. I tend to use just a sort of a darkening patina, just to keep a very warm finish. And I don't really know what to say. When it's working in sheet, it's I mean it's kind of more toxic to work with, because the bronze dust is really nasty. Like Glenn can attest to that.
Is wax still the preferred mode of finishing and protecting both the stainless steel and the bronze?
Yeah.
There used to be something called Incralac, but then they found that it crazed. I don't know if they ever resolved anything like that.
I don't usually. The only thing I put on is wax.
Right.
Because I do use something called permalac, and in some commissions I have used steel, but only for an interior piece, because outside it's impossible to maintain it, even with a lacquer, But I do use a lacquer for furniture items and pieces that are inside, the steel's finished with a lacquer, and it does hold up pretty. And then I also wax on top of that, so that kind of seals it and helps prevent moisture and some additional protection.
Well, the wax is tried and true. I mean, we've been using it for centuries, and as long as you keep applying it, it works.
Yeah, but most people don't maintain things. They just don't. Even if you gave them instructions, they don't have staff that's going to do that. They don't have experience.
Well, some sculptors have actually written that into their contract. The maintenance is actually a really big issue.
Yeah. I mean, even Noguchi, like there's a sculpture park here, Purchase, New York, at the PepsiCo. They had one of those large ovoid pieces of his, and one of the segments, must have become compromised, and it's cracked out and busted. Even Noguchi, he's not around to get the phone call. So those are the worst phone calls to get. I'm having a problem. Oh no.
Well, if it could happen to Noguchi, it could happen to anybody.
Yeah. Eric, the other thing is with these steel pieces, you are really able to take that theme of ascension and give it form, where the concentration of the heart forms are just, or the figures that are really contained.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's two very different ways of approaching sculpture, and I think you've really, you've grown with it, to accommodate what, even in your studio space. It's like there's this these other sculptures in the works, and you're managing spatially the fabrication of some of those larger pieces with the figure, the woman figure,
Right.
in the background. So it's like you've got to be careful. You're doing a dance inside the space while you're doing
I
it.
have a relatively small interior workspace, and I have an outer space that's covered. But it only is about 10 feet high, which is not that tall. That Anahata sculpture, I wasn't able to fully assemble it. I assembled it partly when it was just in a T form, just to make sure all the forms, were relating the way I wanted them to. Yeah, I'm kind of hitting up against that right now with that large commission that it's a little bit bigger it's bigger than the other pieces I've done, and I'm encountering some challenges with it because it's I didn't quite you don't always quite realize, you don't always understand what you're doing until you're in the middle of it. But at least that's and I've always done my best to solve problems and figure things out as I go, and so I'm that process continues.
Oh, you said that your sculpture and life were, reflections of each other. So welcome to life.
Eric, there have been a number of thefts of public bronze sculptures. Has that ever come up in commissions for you or not?
Say that again.
There have been a number of thefts
That's
of public bronze sculptures.
I haven't had any
for the metal, Yeah.
I haven't had any sculpture stolen. They'd be pretty hard to take those things apart.
Okay, no, I didn't know if that ever came up in a commission or not.
I've never had a theft, but I had a theft at an art center of another artist's work that was in a garden. It was a smaller, fairly small piece, and it was outside, and there wasn't any security or. But that was the only time in my 35 years of experience. I mean, Carol, you had work stolen from.
Yeah.
You never recovered that piece, right? That wasn't it. That propeller piece, right?
Yeah, you got a good memory. It was sitting outside of the bus. Yeah, it just disappeared. It was about 750 pounds, and they were doing some construction, and one day it wasn't there. They were all having lunch right outside of it, and the next day it was gone. But I think that's pretty unusual, you know.
Yeah.
But I hadn't heard about the bronze sculptures.
Yeah, I have some fairly sizable bronze sculptures of that skull.
Yeah.
Bronzes and cemeteries and stuff like that. Just for the metal.
Oh, just for the metal.
Just
Wow.
remember.
Oh, God.
I've heard that. I've
Yeah,
heard that.
bronze fetches a lot of money these days.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, you know, I did a big cleanup in my shop. Probably spent way too much time doing cleanup than, you know, I should have been out trying to get new projects. But I had collected so much found metal, you know, and I think I went like even into overdrive when the last few years, I don't know, I guess I went through a divorce, and I think, I don't know what was going on emotionally, that I was picking up every piece of metal that came my way. I couldn't move. And I had stuff from all different periods, all stacked everywhere, and I just felt like, oh my God, I can't move here. So I need to sort of do a little purge. And I ended up made 6,900 pounds of metal I got rid of.
Wow.
You know how much money I got for that steel? You know what steel? It was it was half a cent a pound. So it would have been $345.
Are you serious?
And it was $200 for them to bring and take back the container. So $145. I still haven't gone there to pick it up because I haven't had time. You know, so they'll still owe me $145. Stainless steel you get much more for, and also bronze, or for, you know, brass.
I have to say I was very impressed with how organized and clean your shop looked.
I do try to keep it clean. I spend a lot of time cleaning. I don't like a dirty floor working. You know, I mean, when I'm in the middle of something, if it's intensive, it may get a little bit nuts in there for a couple of days. But even then, like, I'll take time in between, you know, while I'm doing something, you know, and clean up and sort things out, because it's hard. I find it's important to stay organized.
Absolutely.
You know, a lot of times I also try to clean the shop the night before I go finish for the day, and so when I go in the next morning,
Right.
Or that to be the first thing I do. It's nice to go in there in the morning and.
Yeah, no, it's a good practice, I think, for sure. The clutter I always equate to being the clutter in my mind. So if you can start the day off in a place that's not, you don't have to tiptoe around.
There's still plenty of stuff around, you know, but it's somewhat organized.
Any more questions? Thank you so much, Eric. This was wonderful.